Hey everybody, my name is Greg, and this is my first ever podcast. So I'm a little new to the scene, but a little bit about me is I'm a college student right now. I'm entering my sophomore year, and I love the UFC and MMA, and so that's what I'm mainly going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about all the recent news, what I think about, and what I hope for the future. So without further ado, let's get right into it. My notes. With Conor McGregor, of course, the big name of the UFC. Conor recently injured his shin, and it was a bad break right in the shin. And we all saw it. We were all watching it, whether it was in a UFC legal stream on ESPN Plus or on illegal sites, which I don't judge. It gets expensive watching these fights. But anyways, Conor broke his shin like very bad. You could literally see it just was like this, and Conor is claiming that he had a stress fracture in training camp, whereas Dustin says no. It's he kicked my elbow, or he kicked one of my shins, and I checked it. And even Conor's coach said that Coach Kavanaugh said that Conor was actually he broke it on the check from Dustin Porier on the elbow. He said that it wrapped around the elbow right around here when he kicked it, and that's how his shin broke. And so Conor recently on Twitter, he posted pictures of his training camp where you can see clearly in all four of the pictures that there were 4 clear pictures of him with either a cast on his ankle or him icing it or him wrapping it. Regardless, you can see that he is trying to imply that it was not Dustin's check, it was his stress fracture in training camp. He's saying that the UFC knew about his stress fracture, and he actually let him know. But the Nevada Athletic Commission executive director Bob Bennett had not heard of a pre-fight injury. They claim that Conor never and his team never told them about a fight. The UFC has no comment, so we won't know for sure, really, if Conor actually broke it in training camp or fractured it, or if he really broke it from Dustin's check. So we'll never know. We might know. Who knows? But I think that Dana really wanted this fight. I think Conor really wanted the fight too, just to prove something. Dustin, of course. Everybody wanted this fight to happen. And Conor and his team was talking about pulling out at the last second. But, Conor's a businessman. He's a showman. And he can't let his audience down, because his image and his antics are really what makes him and what sells his pay-per-views. So, I don't know. Honestly, I think there was some training camp stress on the ankle, but do I think that was the direct cause of it? Probably not. I think Dustin's a phenomenal athlete, and he probably checked one of Conor's kicks, and that probably really did it. But, we don't really know. Is Conor done in the UFC? No. It's really funny that people say this, because he loses 2 fights. He loses to Khabib Nurmagomedov, arguably the greatest fighter of all time in the UFC, other than John Jones, DC, whatever. And he loses to Dustin Porier, who is one of the greatest lightweights of all time. And people all of a sudden, Conor's done. He's getting old. He can't win. He's out of his prime. And yes, Conor is out of his prime. I think we can all agree on that. But he's not done. He's got a lot in him. In the first round, of course, he's always sharp. He's his best. And we saw that in the most recent fight. That in the very beginning, Conor threw out some kicks. They landed. He caught him with a hook. But the second half of the round, he did get mauled by Dustin. But in the first round of Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 1, he was super sharp in the first round. It looked like he was actually going to win that fight by the end of the first round. But of course, Conor, he tends to gas out, and he's also just not as good as he is in the first round. And so, Dustin Poirier is a guy that in the last 8 fights, he's only lost to Khabib, who I've mentioned is one of the greatest of all time. And he beat guys like Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, 2 phenomenal fighters. And really, it's funny to me that people think that just because Conor lost to Dustin Poirier twice, that he's like done. He can't fight anymore. Regardless. Okay, let's just say that Conor is like what people are saying. He's done. He's not good. He can't even be a top 15 contender anymore. Even regardless, he can sell a fight. Like, he could fight, I don't know, my dog, and he would still sell like a million pay-per-view buys. And so it's just funny that people think that he's not going to fight in the UFC anymore just because he lost twice in a row to the same guy. And they're talking about trilogy fights. Of course, that's going to sell. It's actually really lucky how Conor lost. I thought he was going to lose to begin with. And I'm not a Conor hater. I like Conor. He's not my favorite, but I think I just love what he does for the UFC because he brings so many eyeballs. And so he's not done. He can fight Nate Diaz. He could fight Tony Ferguson. There's a lot of fights that are still there for him and could bring a ton of money to the UFC. And so it's just silly. It really is silly how people believe that he's done because he lost to Dustin Poirier. But who do I think is going to win in the next fight in Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 3? It's Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 4. I completely forgot that it was a trilogy. I completely forgot about the time they fought for the first time and Conor KO'd him. But in the 4th one, I think Dustin gets it done again. I think it's a smart move for him if he wants to make a ton of money. He gained 1.5 million followers over the course of this since Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 2 to 3. He gained 1.5 million followers. And so, it just 1.8 million pay-per-view buys. It just makes a ton of sense for him and his family to want to do this fight. And yes, I think he totally deserves a title shot against Charles Oliveira. And everybody knows that. But I think, is it smart for him to take the money fight? Yes, because I believe that Dustin Poirier is just he's a far better fighter than Conor McGregor right now. And I'm not saying that Conor McGregor would just absolutely lose in a landslide in their next fight. Anything can happen in the UFC. It takes one punch or one kick to win a fight. So anything could happen. Conor's super dangerous. We know that. But I think most of us can agree that Dustin Poirier is a better fighter right now. And he can make another money fight and win on a huge stage. So it's super good for his brand, for his image, everything. And if he can go on from that with the momentum to beat Charles or Oliveira in the title fight, he's going to be a star, really. And that's good for him. That's good for the UFC. but I mean, it's not good for Conor. But it happens, man. It happens. I think for Conor, what my prediction is in the future, I think he's going to be. He is going to be fighting Nate Diaz after the Dustin Porier fight, number 4. I think he's going to lose that, and then fight Nate Diaz. He could beat Nate, and then from there he might fight Tony Ferguson or something. Conor had a very magical run, one of the craziest in the UFC ever, I think. From where he started to beating Jose Aldo in, 13 seconds. I think it's just crazy what he's done, and he became the double champ and brought so many eyeballs to the UFC. It's just he's a Hall of Famer for sure. But moving on, there's also talks of Nate Diaz versus Dustin Porier at 185 pounds in the middleweight. And I think this is an interesting fight because Dustin doesn't have any reason to do this. I mean, except for the money. Nate Diaz brings a good amount of eyeballs to the UFC. He's a fan favorite, and Dustin Poirier right now is he's on his peak and he's in his prime. And so, do I think it makes sense for him to fight at 185? Probably not, but could he do it? Sure. I think that what's smart for him to do is the Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 4. And then if he wins that, which I believe he will, I think he's going to go fight Charles Oliveira for the lightweight belt. And I think he wins that one. I mean, Charles is super dangerous on the ground, but, I don't really know. I mean, that's a whole different story. But I think it just doesn't really make sense for him to go fight Nate Diaz right now. I think every UFC fan would like to see that for sure. But is it something that makes sense in Dustin Poirier's career? Probably not. And, I think Nate Diaz is interesting right now because we all saw that he's still the same old guy that can just take a million punches, and it just seems like he can never go down. I mean, he gets knocked out, but he doesn't get knocked out, which is pretty crazy. In his last fight, it was Leon Edwards, number 3 contender, welterweight contender in the world, against Nate Diaz, who is not currently ranked. And Leon did that because it gets a lot of eyeballs, and it shows the world who he really is, because Nate is a popular guy. And I think in that fight, it was very clear that Leon was the better fighter for almost all 5 rounds, except for 30 seconds of the fight. And, Leon, he just was beating the crap out of this guy. And Nate was taunting him. He was just saying, yo, I'm fine. I'm good. Like, come at me, But you could tell. I mean, these shots were hurting. But, Nate has a crazy chin. We all know that. And he was just completely covered in blood until the last 30 seconds where he caught him with a hook. His special Stockton slap, and then a bam. And it wobbled him, and everyone just went crazy. I was watching with a group of guys, and we were all just screaming because it was so crazy. Because he was just getting beat up for all 5 rounds, completely covered in blood. And I think right when he connected, Leon just went like this, and Nate could have just pounced. And if he did the smart thing in terms of just trying to win a fight, he would have just pounced and ended the fight right there, pinned him against the cage, just batter him with punches. But he didn't do that. He admired his shot. He just pointed at him and mocked him. And then, he was still like, from that point on, he was pushing the fight. He was moving forward, but he wasn't really trying to go in kill mode, where you're just trying to end the fight immediately. And I don't know, I can't really say whether or not it was intended to lose that fight and not win. I mean, he's proved himself in the UFC, and maybe, I was thinking maybe potentially he could have like just said, you know what, Leon is he's the number 3 guy, and he's like in his prime right now. Has a chance to get UFC gold. So maybe he was thinking, you know what, like, this guy's been so unlucky that, he just deserves to go and fight Kamaru Usman for the belt, or have a chance at it. But, then again, he could just be Nate being himself. But who knows? Who really knows? I think, I don't know. I really don't know. But there's a possibility. But I guess we'll never know. And, you could see at the end when Nate was just like, yeah, let's go party with the Nelk boys and at my crib. And he wasn't super mad that he lost or anything. So which is why I believe that he might be he might have thought that, maybe I should just let this guy win because he deserves it, and I'm just doing this for fun and money and whatever. But moving on to something pretty crazy, which was the Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Chris Moutinho fight in the recent Conor McGregor versus Dustin Porier 3 card. Sean O'Malley is a fan favorite. He's a crazy guy. He has a ton of tattoos, rainbow hair, and he's very deadly with his kicks and his punches, or just his striking in general. Super fun guy to watch, but a lot of people criticize him because he fights guys that are unproven in the UFC. He fights guys like Chris Moutinho, who has never been in the UFC before, or he fights guys like I forget his last fight, but the guy wasn't ranked either. And Sean O'Malley isn't. I don't believe he's ranked either. But he's definitely. He's getting main events, or not main events. He's getting on the main cards now in big events, and I think the UFC is really pushing him to showcase him as like a star. And so now people are saying, okay, we've seen that he's deadly. We've seen that he can knock out guys, but can he knock out guys that are legitimately proven and very good opposition that are in the top 15? And so a lot of people believe that he ducks fights and whatever. I'm not here to say that, but that's just what some people say. But anyway, Chris Moutinho, a guy who just recently snagged the contract after the other guy dropped out because of an injury, and so this guy's never fought in the UFC. He's he's fought before in MMA, but not in the UFC. Nobody really knew who this guy was. Sean O'Malley was a plus or minus 1,000 favorite, which is absurd. Which means that if you don't win, then it's like all hell breaks loose, sort of thing. And everybody thought it was going to be a first round KO, and by the way it was going, that's what it looked like. Sean O'Malley was just lighting this guy up, and he was just taking punch after punch and kick after kick. And then Chris just kept moving forward. He just kept walking forward, which was crazy. He got dropped at the end of the first round, and everyone's like, okay, this is it. But he got saved by the bell, and, he rallied the next round, and there he goes again. That the whole time. And he's just getting punched after punch after punch. And this guy's face just is completely bruised and broken, and he keeps going forward. He's barely throwing any strikes, and like Sean O'Malley is landing like a record number of strikes, but Chris just keeps going forward. And then by the third round, which is crazy in itself, nobody expected it to go to the third round. Chris, with like 30 seconds to go, he just gets hit by a batter of punches, and Herb Dean stops the fight. And a lot of people were upset about it because he was still standing. I mean, it was like a TKO where he's not technically knocked out or he's not moving. He just was hit so many times that Herb thought the safe thing to do was to end the fight right there to save him from like serious injury, which a lot of people are upset about because he was a warrior the whole 3 rounds, and a lot of people are saying he deserved to go 3 rounds, like the full 3 rounds. But I mean, Herb Dean is he's a fan favorite ref, and I mean he's my favorite referee too. I think he's the best in the UFC, and I think he did the smart thing, because if you let Sean O'Malley just keep wailing on this guy, I think there could have been some serious problems. I mean, he definitely was concussed. He's definitely facing some repercussions from that. But, even more could have been something bad, and we don't know. So I think Herb did the smart thing. He's going to face backlash for it, of course. But, I mean, the referees' jobs are to protect the fighters, and that's what he did. I mean, all props to Chris Moutinho, though. Everybody loves this guy now. He went from 3,000 followers on Instagram to now over 150,000 just because of that fight. And, he seems like a great guy. There's a picture of him after he got a $75,000 bonus. Right after the fight, the first thing he buys with that money was an ice cream sandwich. And everyone's just like, protect this guy at all costs, like, really getting behind him. And now everyone wants to see him fight again. And, even you can see on his Instagram post all these current UFC fighters who are proven, like contenders. They're just commenting under his post. They're like giving him props and being like, yeah, you're a warrior out there. And, it's you're super strong out there. And so I thought that was super cool. And so what is next for Chris Moutinho? I think, he's going to be brought back for sure, just because of the sheer popularity he got from that. Do I think he's a contender? Definitely not. But, he could definitely be on another undercard. Or, a main card fight is a little much. But, it could happen. Guys who bring eyeballs to the UFC, even if they're the worst fighter ever, and they're still going to get a fight if it brings a lot of money. So, you can see that with in boxing with like Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather, or Jake Paul and Ben Askren. It's just what brings eyeballs, not who's the best or who's the better fighter or whatever. It's just, how crazy can you be and how well can you sell a fight? That's what the industry really cares about right now. But moving on from that, we're going to be talking about my dream matchup, something that I've been talking to all my friends about, and something that I'm just bugging everybody about, and I'm just hoping happens, which, it's not looking great right now, but it is the current heavyweight champion of the world, Francis Ngannou, versus Johnny Bones Jones. I think this would be fireworks. This is just oh my God, I get so excited whenever I talk about it, because it's just such a crazy idea. You have Francis Ngannou, who is, of course, the current heavyweight champion, and he has the strongest punch power in the world. Huge guy, like 6'5", 265 pounds, just an absolute beast. Knocked out Stipe Miocic, the greatest heavyweight of all time. And, you could even see in his last fight with Stipe that he was getting better on the ground. He was stuffing takedowns. He got clipped with a hook, and I don't know if he was actually hurt or he was pretending to be hurt, but it got Stipe to come in, and then Francis just bam hits him with a big shot and drops him and KO. And so everyone is just, I can imagine, could be scared of this man. Even DC didn't want to fight him. He's old and he's enjoying his retirement, so I get it. But it kind of says something that he would refuse to fight him. But the whole issue with this is that John Jones wants to be a heavyweight right now. He's showing that or he's expressing that he is ready to fight in the heavyweight division. He's posting on Instagram and just you could see his training camp photos that he's significantly bigger. He looks like a big guy now compared to what his lean figure at the light heavyweight division. But there's claims that John Jones wants $30 million for the fight against Francis Ngannou, which, it's not, I can't say if that's true or not, because John Jones denies these claims, and he's basically just saying, no, I didn't say that. There's always been some back and forth between Dana and John Jones, and they're not the best of friends, should I say. But I recently watched a podcast with John Jones and Steve-O, and it was really interesting getting some insight on that, because Steve-O is like reinforcing this idea, and John is talking about it, that he's saying now he wants to fight for what he's worth. He knows he's great. He's proven himself in the UFC. Besides all the steroids and all the incidents he's had, regardless, we can still say that he's a great fighter. I think, yes, he should fight for what he's worth. Is he worth $30 million more than like anyone's ever gotten? I don't think so. I think that's very unrealistic. It's just tough because we all want to see this, and I'm sure both those fighters do want to fight each other if given the opportunity, but it's tough because, UFC fighters in general, they don't get paid a whole lot of money, it's sad because they definitely deserve more. There's no like union or anything for UFC fighters, so a lot of these guys are, especially on like the early prelims, in these like UFC fight nights, or they're not making much. They're making like $30K per fight, and if you're fighting, $15K a fight, and if you're making I believe it was $10 to $30K a fight for those like low ranking ones. And so if you're fighting 3 times a year for $10,000, you're making $30,000, which for a UFC fighter, and to spend a whole lot of money on camp and your diet and all these things, there's no way it's not sustainable. So, the top guys like Conor McGregor gets like $5 million, but it's just tough because it's just tough. It's a touchy subject because these guys deserve to get paid more, but I don't really know enough about the financials of the UFC to really make a claim on if they should get paid more. I think they should, but if the pay-per-views and the cost of what it takes to set up the whole fights and everything is more than we think, and is just makes sense for what they're being paid right now, then I don't think they should get paid more. But just, I really hope this Ngannou versus John Jones fights happen. It would be crazy. you know, John Jones, if he fights and wins and beats this guy, like I think you can call him the best of all time. There's really no questions. I mean, steroids, of course, but it's something that I really hope happens. If it doesn't, I'll be very sad. But speaking of Francis Ngannou, it's just a really inspirational and phenomenal story of where this guy came from in his whole life. He was as a kid, he'd walk like an hour to school, and then an hour back, and sometimes he'd go the whole day at school without eating anything because his family couldn't afford it, or he just didn't have any supplies. He didn't even have pencils or paper because he couldn't afford that, and the kids would make fun of him at the school because he just couldn't afford anything. And then around 10 years old or so, he would go and work in the mines, a really dangerous job, and it was terrible conditions. He was like mining complete heat or torrential rain as a kid, and I'm getting all this information from the Joe Rogan podcast where he spoke about this, which I recommend you watch. But he did all this, and he grew up, and he realized he had to get out of his situation. So he fled to France, and when he got there, he was homeless, and he was living in a parking garage. And I don't exactly remember how he got picked up by the UFC or how he started getting into fighting, but just from knowing all of that and going to where the position he is today is truly inspirational. And how can you not root for that guy? It's really quite crazy, the talent that this world has, and that we might never know about just because of financial circumstances. You're seeing it in Team USA, and the basketball around the world. Nigeria and Australia just beat the USA in basketball, and which is like a complete shocker to everybody. They have only lost in an exhibition match, I think, once or 0 times. Team USA has, and they've just lost twice in a row because now that there has been more money put into these international development for kids and teenagers around the world, you're seeing all these stars like Finals MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's a Greek guy, and it's quite crazy how you can find such crazy talent in middle of nowhere. We might not never see that just because of their financial situation. But moving on, let's talk about Brandon Moreno, the new bantamweight champion of the world, the flyweight champion of the world. I really like this guy right now. I thought Figueiredo versus Moreno 1 was one of the most entertaining fights I've ever seen in my entire life. I thought that was such an amazing fight for all 5 rounds. There was just action. They're both getting dropped. They're both landing punches, kicks, and it ended in a tie, which was really unfortunate for Brandon Moreno because, if you're fighting the champ and you beat, or if you don't beat him or you tie, you can't get the belt, and the champ keeps the belt even if it was a tie. So of course they had to run it back, and they fought again, and I just it was I'm lost for words because it was so inspirational, just seeing him not only just fight this guy and beat him, but he dominated, and he was great on the ground. He finished with submission, a rear naked choke, and he was just doing phenomenal, and against a guy Figueiredo who normally is I think is way heavier for the division he's fighting, and at the end of the fight when Joe Rogan interviewed Brandon Moreno, he was in tears, and he was saying, I did this for my country, I did this for Mexico. He's the first UFC fighter that's Mexican born, and he was just brought so many emotions out, and everybody, the entire country of Mexico was rooting for this guy and got behind him because it showed how passionate he was. And he's just he's a great guy. His hobbies besides fighting, of course, is he likes to build Legos, and he likes to do a bunch of little nerdy stuff, which is funny from a UFC fighter. Which I'm asking Lego to make a character out of him, because that would be great. That I would love to see that Brandon Moreno Lego, just because of how much he loves it. And it was a great night, seeing that, just a guy like him win that fight and bring out so many emotions in everybody. It was quite a sight to see. But what do I think is next for him? I think it could be Askar Askarov, a guy who he fought before Figueiredo, and it also ended in a draw. So I think there could be some story behind that. It could bring some eyeballs to the fight. I think Askarov is also a great fighter. So, does he deserve a title shot? I don't know. It's up to you to decide. But or Dana White. But Figueiredo wants the trilogy, which is interesting because I think it could be a good fight to watch. But I just think Figueiredo, no disrespect to him, but he walks around at a weight that's way heavier than flyweight, and he just bullies these guys in the flyweight division. So I'm not saying I don't like him. I'm just saying that I would much rather prefer to have a champion like Brandon Moreno, who is around the weight that he fights, and it's a whole nother story. But do I think the trilogy should happen? I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think there is definitely, trilogy fights always sell, so that would be cool. But I think Moreno wins that one for sure, just based on the last fight. And a lot of people said that or Figueiredo claimed that he was sick. He was very sick before the fight. But that was actually the first fight, and so people get that mixed up with the second fight where he recently beat him. So do I think the trilogy fight should happen? Why not? But I think Moreno can finally distance himself from that and say, I'm the champ now, and so I decide what I want to do. Another thing that's being talked about in the UFC is Amanda Nunes and her fight against Juliana Pena. I think this one is an interesting one because, it's Amanda Nunes. We get to see her just completely dominate again. But the controversy behind this is that she's not getting the main event. She's the co-main, and the main event is Ngannou versus Derek Lewis, which I think that's going to be very, very interesting to watch. I'm assuming they're going to be fighting for the title or a title shot. And, it's another one of those things where it's tough because if Amanda Nunes doesn't sell pay-per-views as well as what a Ngannou versus Derek Lewis fight would sell, then she can't be the main event. If people aren't going to tune in to watch her just for the sake of her, as the main event, that it doesn't really make sense. Which is just it's sad because I think she deserves it. We all know that she deserves a main event, just because she is clearly the greatest women's fighter of all time. She's double champ, and not only does she beat these women that she's fighting, she just mauls and demolishes them, and there is no contest. But I think that, again, the pay-per-views, if you can't sell, it doesn't work. And I'm not saying that she can't sell pay-per-views. I'm just saying that I personally don't know the exact what the thought process for the UFC was with that, but I think that it's along the lines of, if Derek Lewis and Ngannou sell more, which they are predicting, than a Amanda Nunes fight, then they're going to make that the main event. And heavyweight always brings a lot of eyeballs because it's the baddest man on the planet, if you're the champ. So it's just it sucks because Amanda's such a great fighter. She's the GOAT for women's fighters, and it's just women's fighting in the UFC is not in the same league as men's fighting yet, just because it's kind of like that for most sports. Like WNBA doesn't bring as many viewers as the NBA does. But there is sports where that's the opposite, like women's figure skating, or gymnastics. People would much rather see that than men's gymnastics or figure skating. But I just it really is crazy how good Amanda Nunes is. And it just seems like it's a running joke in the UFC community or MMA community that, Amanda Nunes is just so good that the UFC is just picking these people to go get slaughtered. It's not even a question if she will win. It's just, who wants to fight Amanda Nunes? You're going to lose, but who wants to go fight her? And now it's Juliana Pena's turn to get demolished. And, Pena's not a bad fighter at all. She's, she's getting the title shot. So, clearly she can't be bad. But she's a plus 450 odds, which means that in Vegas, in terms of betting, plus anything on the plus side is an underdog. So plus 450 is a really decent amount as an underdog. What do I think will happen in that fight? I think Amanda Nunes keeps the belt pretty easily, and it's just another day in the office. But finally, I want to talk about Nick Diaz returning to the UFC, which is something pretty awesome. He's an old guy, but the guy he's fighting, Robbie Lawler, is also an old guy. So I think, I don't want to really speculate a lot about this. I don't want to get very serious about this fight, just because it's just another fun one. It's hard to say that you're just fighting for fun as a fighter when you are fighting a guy, which means you can get very hurt, or you can seriously hurt another guy or woman. But I think this one's just cool. Everybody loves Nate and Nick Diaz, so it's fun to see just two vets in Diaz and Robbie Lawler just come back and scrap. And I believe this will be under the Ngannou versus Lewis card. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think that this will be fun. This is a fun one, and I'm excited to watch it. I'm excited just to not really be stressed out when I watch it, because most fights, I'm rooting for somebody or I want to see something happen, so I get very stressed out. Like I'm a big fan of Kamaru Usman, so every time he fights, I get very nervous. I'm like, even though I know he's really good, I'm just, oh man, it's like I'm just moving around, I'm bobbing up and down my knee, and like, it's that's what makes it fun though. That's what I love about the sport, is that anything can happen. But yeah, everybody loves Nick and Nate Diaz and Robbie Lawler, of course. And so seeing these guys fight once again or one last time, it'll be fun. It'll be a good one for sure. I don't know how good the fight will be, but just regardless of how their skill level at this age, they're fan favorites. So it'll be fun. And so I was wrong. I have one last thing to talk about, and that is that Gilbert Burns is boring. And that's a funny one that I hear all the time, especially after his last fight with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Objectively, I'm gonna take my UFC fan and MMA fan bias out the window, and I'm just gonna look at it from a regular, I've never seen fights before perspective, and that is that that fight was boring. Because if you don't know anything about grappling, and you don't know anything about wrestling or really like the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or whatever, it's just guys sitting on top of each other or just like moving around on the ground like for 3 rounds, and that's kind of boring. You want to see someone get punched or kicked in the head. You want to see a knockout. And I mean that makes sense. I'd rather see Gilbert Burns just do a flying knee or run off the cage and do a roundhouse kick. That'd be awesome. Or other vice versa with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and just a real brawl. That'd be awesome. I mean, everybody loves those fights, but you really have to study MMA and study grappling. And actually try it and just go to a UFC class or just go to like a beginner Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class and spar and work on the mat with somebody to really understand that it's super interesting and pretty crazy what these guys can do on the ground. So, I can agree that a fight only on the ground, it's definitely not as interesting. But once you've actually done it and tried it for yourself, it's just super cool and very interesting to see what these top guys in the world are doing on the ground and what ways they are passing a guard or what ways they are, subtly slipping the elbow under your chin, like how they can set that up or how they can set up a Kimura, how they can set up a heel hook, how they can set up an armbar. It's very, very interesting to see. But of course, I can admit it. I too would say that a fight on the ground, a fight standing is probably more interesting from an objective standpoint. And so now at this point, I think I have ran out of things to say. Or talk about, but this is my first podcast and just experimenting and trying things out. So let me know how it goes. Let me know how I did. If nobody watches this, which probably will happen, who cares? I'm just doing this for fun. But if you are watching this and you did enjoy it, let me know. And thanks for watching. I'll see you sometime in the future, I hope.